Hey there guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my movie review series. So those of you who have been following my movie reviews recently will know that I recently made a trip to the pound shop and I basically bought a whole bunch of movies that I had never heard of before. I mentioned in a couple of recent videos how the pound shop has a lot of obscure movies, a lot of movies that are, didn't get a release over here or came out on DVD and were direct to DVD, and some movies that were hidden gems, some movies that occasionally turn out to be better than you expect. And yeah, I bought a bunch of movies, like I said, never heard of them, and this was one of those movies, Ice Soldiers. So Ice Soldiers was released in December of 2013, I believe, and it stars Dominic Purcell, who you guys might recall was one of the main characters from the TV show Prison Break, which I really enjoyed, by the way. I got that whole series on DVD, and yeah, I'd really recommend it. I'd recommend that you check that out. And yeah, he's the main character here. And basically at the start of this movie, it starts off in 1959, and essentially there's a group of scientists in the middle of this Arctic wasteland, and they find the wreckage of an aircraft, and on board that aircraft were several Russian super soldiers. These super soldiers then break out, they massacre everybody at the facility that they're at. They leave one person alive, and it's a woman, and instead of killing her, one of them just decides to rape her and leaves her alive, and they basically disappear without a trace. And that's how the movie begins, so you get kind of a grim and dark opening to the movie. It then does like a major time jump. It jumps forward to like 50 years in the future, and there's a new group of scientists in the same area. And basically Dominic Purcell's character, who's like the lead scientist, he is searching a cave, and he finds the preserved remains of these three super soldiers preserved perfectly in the ice. Basically one thing leads to another. They thaw them out, put them on life support, find that they are still alive, and they break out, and the whole thing happens again. They massacre the place and they escape, and basically this time Dominic Purcell's character has to hunt them down and stop them. And it's a fairly low budget, generic action thriller, and it's a movie that I would say that I somewhat enjoyed. Now, it's nothing special. What I will say is this movie it's very, very generic. It's very much a B movie. It has a few cliches here and there. One thing that this movie has been compared to is the movie Universal Soldier. In fact, if I read the back of the case, it says the best super soldier movie since the first Universal Soldier. I suppose there are similarities, but there are also some very clear differences to that movie. One of the things that I did like about this movie, and despite it being a somewhat low budget movie, it's a movie that was filmed mostly on location, and I do like that because it adds an air of authenticity to the movie, because obviously the backgrounds and the areas that they're in and just the places that you see, the places that the movie's set, it's all practical, so there's an air of authenticity. It makes it seem so much more plausible and realistic. There's also a lot of practical squibs, practical stunt work. There's no like obvious CGI in the movie, there's no obvious stunt doubles or anything like that. And I thought that the action scenes, though few and far between, were actually pretty good. I mean, on the back of the case, it is described as being a pulse-pounding action thriller. I wouldn't really say that. This is a pretty slow-paced movie. I mean, you get the opening of the movie where there's some action, and then for a good half an hour or so, it's very slow and very talky, and not a whole lot really happens. But then once it gets going, it really gets going, and it does pick up towards the end, and there's some brutal kills, there's some brutal fight scenes, and it's just a movie that's perfectly generic and perfectly watchable. I didn't really have any major issues with it. Some of the actors that are in the movie, I mentioned Dominic Purcell, also Michael Ironside, who you might recall, he was in the movie Starship Troopers. I think he played the teacher in that movie. He's in this movie. Doesn't really have a whole, huge part in the movie. Doesn't have a huge role, but he is there. He is one of the sort of expeditionary characters. Some of the scenes in the latter part of the movie are quite funny. They do work in like some dark humor. Like, for example, the three Russian agents end up at this nearby town, and they end up going into a strip club, and there's like some funny dialogue there that's mostly in Russian. It's quite funny. That sort of lightens the tone of the movie a little bit. I did kind of like that. There's a woman in this movie called, I believe the actress's name is Camille Sullivan. I believe that's the actress's name. And yeah, there was kind of an unresolved issue with her character for me, because in the early part of the movie she's introduced and she's basically treated by the movie as if she's a prominent character, like as if she's going to be one of the main characters. However, weirdly enough, I mentioned earlier how in the opening scene of the movie one of the women gets raped and she's the only survivor. Basically, she's left alive after being raped, whereas everyone else is massacred at the same facility. Well, there's a scene in this movie where Camille Sullivan's character, the same thing, or it's implied, you don't actually see it, but it's implied that the same thing happened to her. It's implied that her character is raped. And it made me think back to the opening scene of the movie where the woman was raped and she was left alive. Yet after this happens to Camille Sullivan's character, you never see her again. Her character's never mentioned again. She's never alluded to again. You never see her, you never hear of her. Like, literally, her character literally disappears after the scene where it's implied that she's been raped, which kind of makes me think, so they decided to kill her this time, which doesn't, I guess it kind of makes sense, but it just was kind of unresolved, because I was expecting her to be revealed later on in the movie, maybe towards the end, because like I said, I mean, with what happened at the beginning of the movie, I felt that was kind of foreshadowed, but it seems to me like I was missing something, because it's implied that her character is raped, and then she disappears from the movie, so I'm just assuming, wait, they killed her off? I would have liked for there to have been a little bit of, I don't know, closure there, like because it sort of leaves it up to your imagination, but I digress. It isn't a major issue with the movie, it's just something I thought I'd bring up. There is a plot twist involving what happened at the beginning, which I'm not going to spoil, but what I will say is that I saw the plot twist coming from a mile away. It really wasn't much of a surprise, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it was a decent enough way to tie the main character to this plot, you know, to give him some emotional weight to what he's doing, basically, and I enjoyed it. It was decent enough. The ending of the movie is very anticlimactic, and yeah, it just sort of ends abruptly, and I felt there could have been a bit more dialogue at the end to sort of wrap things up and give it some closure, you know, give it a better conclusion. One issue that I do have with the movie is the fact that the characters are so dumb. Like, I know this is a B movie, I get that it's not like a big budget Hollywood movie with you know, top quality writers, but what I will say is that the writing involving some of the main characters of the movie and some of the decisions they make, I mean, they're just so stupid. I mean, they find these Russian agents in the snow, in the ice, sorry, and they know that these people are dangerous. They know that these guys could wake up at any moment, massacre everybody, and disappear into the snow. They know that, yet they don't observe them, they don't restrain them, they don't have any safeguards in place, you know, they don't have anybody observing or watching over them, or making sure they don't escape, or at least making sure there's a deterrent to try and stop them escaping. There's really nothing. I mean, it's quite ridiculous actually how stupid the characters are, just so stupid, and that was quite disappointing for me. But nonetheless, I mean, I guess they had to do that in order to justify why these characters escaped and why the movie became what it was, but I still would have liked for there to have been a little bit more realism to some of the decisions that the characters make. But nonetheless, this is an okay movie. I'd say it's a perfectly decent B movie, a decent low budget action thriller that's quite short. I mean, it's only an hour and a half long, so you know, it's not really, it's harmless. It's a harmless movie. It's not really going to take a lot of time off your hands, and it's a movie that's decently made. You know, it's got good cinematography, good acting, it's filmed on location, it's got good action scenes for the most part, though few and far between, and it's a movie I had fun with. It's a perfectly average, decent movie that you can't really go wrong with, yeah, so I give this movie a 5 out of 10, I think it's pretty average. Again, it's a movie I bought for very cheap out the pound shop. It's a movie that I think went completely into obscurity when it came out, and it went completely under the radar when it came out. This movie, it was a direct-to-DVD movie, but I don't think it did that well. I don't think that it got many sales, and I have never heard anybody even mention this movie before, so yeah, this was very obscure. This is a movie that really went under the radar, and I was quite glad I found it because I thought it was decent. So yeah, let me know what you guys think anyway. Stay tuned for more movie reviews. I do have a couple more movies that I saw for the first time recently that I'm going to review, some retrospective reviews. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. God bless.